Hello, everybody. I'm Jesse Waters, along with Kimberly Guilfoyle, Juan Williams, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. About 3 hours away from NFL kickoff, players will begin taking the field for the first time since Monday's anthem protest. And there's expected to be some more controversy at tonight's Bears-Packers game. Green Bay says its players, coaches, and staff will link arms during the anthem this evening, and they've encouraged their fans to do the same. President Trump and a lot of other Americans upset with the league's ongoing demonstrations. He spoke exclusively about it with Fox News in a new interview.
The NFL cannot disrespect our country. They cannot disrespect our flag or our national anthem. And they can't have people sitting down or kneeling down during our national anthem. I have so many friends that are owners, and they're in a box. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of them. They say, we are in a situation where we have to do something. I think they're afraid of their players, you want to know the truth. And I think it's disgraceful. And they've got to be tough, and they've got to be smart.
Afraid of their players, Kimberly. Well, according to the Washington Post, the NFL's game operations manual says that, quote, all players must be on the sideline for the national anthem and must, quote, stand at attention, face the flag, hold helmets in their left hand, and refrain from talking or face disciplines such as fines or suspension. So are the owners afraid of disciplining their players?
Well, it seems so, right? Because there's going to be public outrage either way. Then they don't want the players to say, oh, in solidarity, we're going to walk out. I mean, you don't want this thing to escalate more than it has. You want to, yes, encourage healthy discussion, absolutely. But they are there to do a job. And it is within the rules and the regulations. So, again, I'm going to say this. Roger Goodell needs to handle this and meet with the owners and come to some kind of solution, because this is it's bad for everybody. I mean, it's putting the players are now being felt like they're put in a position. The owners feel like they're being put in position. The NFL, it's just everybody. It's like a confluence of just total chaos.
And it looks like, Dana, tonight, according to reports, everyone's going to link arms, and there may not be any kneeling. Well, what does that signify to you?
That maybe they've reached a turning point, and they can figure out a way to get past this, which I think would be good for everybody.
Yeah.
Because I think that in a way what's happened is that because you have to, you lose the ability to see each other as individuals when you're always fighting on the culture war. You're either on this team or that team.
Yes.
So I think what the owners have actually tried to do, and starting with Kaepernick, was to try to be thoughtful, respectful, and try to understand his views. Like, maybe they should have just tried to dealt with that right then, fines immediately, like you're done, out of here. And that could have been one way to deal with it.
Set an example.
But also the horses out of the barn. So you're not going to be able to put, this has all happened. This is now out there in the open. And the only thing they can try to do is move past it, because I think that the players want to play.
Yep.
The fans want to enjoy it, and the owners want to make money. So,
for sure.
I imagine that the president would like to rather talk about his tax reform plan.
That's right. Or maybe he
Although
might
maybe
like
not.
talking about this, too. This is also a lot of fun. Greg, what do you think?
It just becomes more and more comical every day. These are grown men, and they're engaging in this kind of it's almost like middle school play acting. And I know the phrase virtue signaling is overdone, but it's like they're engaged in something that is almost not real, that it's just starting to spread like this weird, hysterical social justice virus. And if they don't do it, and I think Trump is right, I think they're scared, because they're scared of online mob peer pressure. They're scared of being seen as, when you have people saying, well, if you stand, you're a racist. There are people saying that now.
Yeah.
So there is this peer pressure that is happening that you used to have in middle school. I thought the Cowboys created a pretty good solution. Kneel before the anthem, because that removes the confusion. Here's what you have to understand. Most Americans, when they see you kneel during the anthem, think you're protesting the flag. And you could say, no, we're not. It's about social injustice. But you got to forgive us for being confused. If you've got to explain your protest, your protest is a failed one. So separate it. Kneel somewhere else. And by the way, if I were a cop, you got to do your job there. If they're kneeling because of the police, the cops should kneel when the players are coming out on the field.
And to that point about the message being lost, Michael Bennett, the defensive end for the Seattle Seahawks, I thought put a really fine point on it. Let's listen to what he said.
I would like to challenge every American that's watching this show to treat people better. That's really what it's about. It's about treating people like human beings. That's the first step. The first step is to recognize and see somebody as an equal being when you recognize them. This is not a violent protest. This is a peaceful protest. We're challenging people spiritually, not physically, spiritually, to change the way that you've been doing, change the culture.
What do you think about that one?
I loved it. I think it's a big challenge spiritually to have people acknowledge when you have social injustice in the country. So I don't think it's a failed protest by any means.
Well,
in fact, I think it's a growing protest. And you look at the numbers, by the way, in terms of what Americans think, and Americans generally think, it's not so cool to disrespect the flag in any way. But they also think that what President Trump's response has been is way wrong. So that even more people than have any trouble with the kneeling when the flag is shown and the anthem played, more people say President Trump's response is out of order. And in specific, I think people are still upset over the idea that he would use the term SOBs to describe the players.
What's
because
worse,
it sounds
SOBs
demeaning.
or cops dressed as pigs on socks?
Please.
What's worse?
That's
No,
just
that's a simple-
that's
simple
so
question.
small and so
Simple
trivial.
question.
No, I think it's, you try
What's
to
the
distract.
difference?
The difference is one is a substantive, important issue in our society having to do with the way people are treated.
Cops looking like pigs?
No,
on
the other
socks?
one is basically a caricature, and it's a silly thing that was all it is. But you want
While
to make
cops
it
are
into
getting shot
the
and killed.
equal of what's taking place. And I think when we think about how the players are handling it, how the owners are handling it, what you see is people trying to signal, I think it's what the Packers are doing tonight, Jesse, are trying to signal, you know what, let the fans get involved and show that they too understand what the players are saying. They don't have to necessarily agree with every aspect of it, but the idea is you would acknowledge that there is a social problem with the way police deal with black people in this country.
There's a social problem without black men are dealing with other black men. There's more violence between black men than black men and white cops.
So
and
does
you know
that excuse what goes on?
No,
Ray?
I would like to see an equal amount of attention devoted to that.
I think that there is a ton. We pay a lot of attention
Not by the
to it.
players. They're kneeling.
Are you kidding?
They're kneeling during the
That's where
anthem
you
to
are so
protest
wrong.
police violence
See, this is
against
like,
cops.
This is like saying, these guys don't know what they're standing for. They don't know what they're doing. They're
can't
just
explain
lost.
it.
No,
Players
in
are not
fact-
explaining it.
In fact, the owners have made the point that the players are involved in social causes and charities, that they do a great deal, and that this is not about somehow a bunch of juveniles who don't know what they're doing or don't know how to protest.
What's the difference between social injustice and injustice?
I think this is a social injustice. You can talk about
What's the difference?
economic injustice.
No.
You can talk
I just
about
want
military
injustice. Tell me the difference between injustice and social injustice.
I just told
you were talking about
can have-
economic injustice.
Yes, I just said
What's
you
the
can
difference
have
between
all sorts
injustice
of
and social injustice?
This is a social injustice in terms of race relations inside our own country.
I would say, to disagree with you, Juan, that if the mission of the protest was to talk about police brutality, that failed.
No,
Because
it hasn't.
no one's talking about police brutality right now. We're talking about disrespecting the flag, and
Well,
we're
I'll tell
talking
you what.
about Trump. And I believe that everybody agrees that you have a right to protest a noble issue, which is being against police brutality, but the time to do it is not during the national
I
anthem.
see. So that's why
let's
we
get-
had. Look,
Kim,
that's
let's
why,
get Kimberly to
hang
react
on,
in
I'll
here.
I'll let you in, but just let me just say that's why you had a 91-year-old veteran in Missouri, white man, taking a knee, and why I just want to show you this. This is a 60-year-old black veteran wearing an American Legion hat the other day in Indianapolis as the president's motorcade ran by, taking a knee.
Well,
with
you've
the
also
folded
had
flag.
veterans burning their jerseys and their season tickets to protest what's going on the field. Kimberly.
The problem is that the message, important that people want to be against police brutality or injustice, fine, but it is getting lost in this. You're right, because we're talking about Trump, we're talking about everything else, and talking about why people are disrespecting the flag. They're not talking about that issue, and I think the issue that they want to talk about, they have absolutely every right to do so. Okay, but it doesn't give people then the right to disrespect the hardworking men and women that are police officers and law enforcement in this country by large measure that serve admirably and courageously and put their lives on the line every day. So I have no tolerance for that kind of disrespect of officers when you're doing things like this and calling for police officers pigs in a blanket and for them to be killed and behaving the way people are. I agree with Michael Bennett, the Seahawks. Treat everybody, treat people with respect. Make people feel like they're present, like they count, like you see them, you hear them, and try to lend a listening ear when someone has something to tell you about how they feel.
Right, and just as we want black men to be respected by police officers, we want veterans to be respected by the players on the field during the anthem.
Right.
The polling says 64% think players should stand and be respectful during the national anthem. This looks like the country's pretty much in agreement on this.
Well, yes, except that in the Fox News poll last night, it showed that year over year, actually, the people who thought that it was acceptable to basically
To kneel.
protest the anthem, whether it be kneeling or whatever, that's actually it's gone up. The
Little bit,
acceptance
yeah.
of it has gone up by 6 points in a year. I mean, and maybe that's just because we're talking about it more. But I
Maybe.
would also say on the social media thing, we should listen to what Senator Lankford said. He was talking about these Russian troll farms doing it again, like they did in the election. They take people's pictures from the internet, make fake accounts, and then they either hashtag take a knee or hashtag boycott NFL. And it looks like there's a whole bunch more controversy than there actually is because they want to sow chaos.
So the Russians. Again.
I'm just saying.
Call Mueller.
But I just think that I think we should face up to it. And also, but if you feel like there's a lot of peer pressure on a certain issue, know that half of that is probably fake people, robots in Russia trying to do that to cause chaos.
Russian robots.
There you
Greg,
go.
right up your alley.
Everything put together in one nice box.
And I do.
But by the way, I think Juan, I think you are misinterpreting me. I'm not against the protest. I'm just saying it's a failed protest when people are confused by it. That's what I'm saying. I think people are confused by what it is because they found the wrong symbol to kneel in front of.
Yeah.
You can protest all you want, and bosses have a right to be upset if it's on the clock. That makes sense to me. But it's okay. They don't get fired. They don't get suspended. So what? Life goes on. We're making this into some kind of hysterical soap opera because I don't know why. Because identity politics, there's no way out of it. Once you get in it, you're stuck.
Greg, this is America. This is American history. We've talked about how this is a football league that wouldn't hire black people for a long time. That was white identity politics,
Right.
okay? We talk about who gets to play quarterback.
That's
and all.
not-
Oh,
See, you're explaining it
white
again.
identity politics. You don't want to hear me explain it?
No.
Why?
What I'm saying is the protest was about police.
Yes.
And you're explaining it.
No, you
Never
mind.
said
to me.
I'm sorry.
You said to me.
It would be so
somehow-
clear. It'd be great if this protest was clear and that everybody understood.
Okay, I'll tell you what's very clear. If you look at the poll numbers, it says 57% disapprove of Trump's response. 48% say they don't like the idea of the players kneeling when the anthem is played. But remember, 57% said Trump went over the line. Only 30% think, in fact, that a player should be fired, which is what Mr. Trump called for, firing players. And people think this is a form of protest. If you want to do it, that's on you. We may not agree, but you shouldn't be fired for speaking your mind.
But you have to understand, a businessman, when he looks at an event, which is a place of work, and you're doing it on the clock, a businessman
and
will
you
think
have a contract.
that you should be fired.
You have
But
the
that's
contract.
an opinion. And you know what?
Yeah,
Opinions
but that's
matter.
fine, Greg. But guess what? That's not what the owners are saying. The owners are saying,
That's up to
in
them.
fact, we want to join and show that the players are
Because they're
unified.
Because they're afraid.
Oh, and that's raised another point with a lot of people. I don't know if you've noticed this. People say, oh, so is he saying that the white owners are afraid of the black players?
God. Wow. I don't know about that, but I think we can all agree that the linking of the arms, that's a much better positive step than kneeling.
Maybe we
during
can
the
all do
anthem.
calisthenics.
Can't we just put our
Ahead.
hands over our heart?
One of the most heartwarming, emotional scenes ever, not a bad idea, on Capitol Hill is House Majority Whip Steve
Not a bad
Scalise
idea.
returns to Congress months after surviving an assassination attempt. Trust me, do not miss this. Next.
My fight song, take back my life song.
More than 3 months ago, House Majority Whip Steve Scalise miraculously survived an attempt to assassinate GOP lawmakers on a baseball field in Virginia. Today, he returned to the job for the first time since the shooting in a packed House chamber filled with joy. Then, the Louisiana congressman delivered an emotional address to his colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You have no idea how great this feels to be back here at work in the People's House. When I was laying out on that ball field, the first thing I did once I was down and I couldn't move anymore is I just started to pray. And I will tell you, it gave me an unbelievable sense of calm, knowing that at that point it was in God's hands. A lot of people ask, did this event change you? Yes, it changed me, but not in the ways you might think. It's only strengthened my faith in God, and it's really crystallized what shows up as the goodness in people. I got to see that goodness in people.
Scalise thanked the Capitol Hill officers who saved his life and countless of others that day in June. And then he had a personal message for all the lawmakers in that room.
When I come back into this chamber here today, it just seeing the faces of all of you, it just means more to me than you can imagine. So thanks for all of that love and support. We are the People's House. This is the place where these ideas are supposed to be debated, and we fight through those issues, but ultimately we come together on whatever the board shows as 218. If you can put the majority together, that's what rules the day. It's so important that as we're having those political battles, we don't make them personal. I am so honored to be back here in the House serving with you. God bless each and every one of you, and God bless the United States of America.
What a special moment. And a man who really just fought for his life. There were moments, there was very touch and go, where people really thought he wasn't going to make it. But he said through faith and prayer and the courageousness, Dana, of those officers putting their life on the line to be able to save him and the other lawmakers, truly a powerful moment, I think, in a really impactful message to say, you know, respect our differences. We can debate, but ultimately we have this system of governance.
And incredible work also by the healthcare workers, the doctors and nurses, like the emergency room, but
Yes.
also the rehabilitation, because our news cycles go so fast, it's hard to remember. This was actually only 2.5 months ago
Wow.
that this shooting took place. And of course, it was so traumatic. And remember when President Trump and the First Lady go to the hospital to visit, the question was he going to make it?
Right.
And the injury could have severed an artery, and this story would not be as wonderful as it is today. So yes, I think an amazing return, and you can see his colleagues all seem genuinely happy to have him back. And our own Lauren Fine, who used to work here as a producer, is now his press secretary for the Majority Whip, and has been working hard to make this moment happen. I thought it was flawless.
It was fantastic. So she did a wonderful job. It must have been her time here with us on the 5. Greg, powerful moment. And you know, he brings up the message that, you know, the Capitol officers saved his life. And, you know, I have to tell you, thank God that they were armed and there to be able to protect the people.
Yeah, it's also amazing how strong he sounds after 2.5 months. You know, it points out a really strange, sad reason for him being alive was that the surgeons were able to save a gunshot victim because they're so good at it now. Yeah. I mean, they've got a lot of practice in D.C. and in other states working on gunshot victims. And it reminds you, the numbers of gunshot victims of murder victims could be much worse than they are now, but it's being covered by the fact that these surgeons are so good at saving lives. Imagine the numbers in Chicago or in D.C. So it's not a reduction really in homicides, but surgeons and technology reducing murder. So that's kind of amazing. To your point, our news cycle, this thing would have been a huge, huge deal for a year.
Yep.
But seems like it happened forever ago because we're so constantly churning through stories, you know? It's amazing.
It's unbelievable. So happy to see him, I bet, and his family, too. My goodness, so nice.
Yeah, it was a powerful moment. I'm not the most devout guy, but when he's talking about prayer, he's talking about people coming together, you just get the chills running up and down your spine. He wasn't supposed to survive. That was a gunshot wound in a part of the body that's not really supposed to sustain bullets like that, and he fought back. Now, Gabby Giffords also shot in the head, fought back, recovered bravely. We talked about on 9/11, the anniversary, the United Flight 93 people that stormed the cockpit. Or when you look at Harvey, people wrestling other Americans out of the water into safety. It's those moments where you really see the fighting American spirit. And it inspires people, and it inspires you to come together as a fellow American. But now these moments are so few and far between. You know, we were united after 9/11 for a while.
Yes.
And then Iraq tore us apart. the Scalise shooting, a couple months ago, we had that moment where we reflected about our rhetoric. That's gone, especially after Charlottesville. Then Harvey hit, and we looked at the Texas resilience. And then now all of a sudden we're talking about the divisiveness of the kneelers.
Right.
So people just need to recognize this country is much stronger when we're together and not divided.
All right, so the message of unity, one of healthy discussion and debate, that ultimately at the end of the day, if you can put 218 up and the majority will rule, but we can respect each other in that debate process along the way.
Well, absolutely. I think I hope that's the message people take away from this, because I think we need more of it. And oftentimes it seems like, division and anger rule the day. But what it comes down to is I think Americans do honor each other. And I loved it when Scalise, he did an interview with 60 Minutes,
Yes.
in which he talked about what the doctors did for him at MedStar Washington Hospital Center. And he said, in very humorous terms, they put Humpty Dumpty back together again, because he described all the damage in that pelvic area and how, in fact, he then later had an infection, and it just took a lot of work and a lot of time. So looking at him, knowing him, I can see he's lost weight. But boy, I thought he looked much better than I would ever have guessed. I thought he was going to look like a shell, but no, it looks like Steve Scalise is still in there and his spirit's stronger than ever.
He's a good majority whip.
Yes, he
in
is.
terms of his skills at being able to get lawmakers to be all on the same page, and the president's going to need that going into the tax reform debate.
And I hope they listen a little bit extra closely to him now at this point. Well, God bless him and his family. And as Dana said, the men and women that saved his life in the hospital, and the Capitol officers as well. Ahead, the woman accused of leaking NSA secrets is trying to blame us for the crime. This one, well, you're going to have to stay tuned to hear.
What is going on behind me? All right. Do you remember Reality Winner? The NSA contractor who leaked top secret info on Russians meddling in our election claims she was mad at her employer for having Fox News on their office TVs. Yep, it's all our fault, especially Lou Dobbs. But I get it. Fox News can be annoying. We're always reporting what other networks leave out. Being fair and balanced can drive you nuts, constantly challenging your worldview. By the way, at my gym, the TVs are always on Bravo, so it's all Kardashians. Congratulations, Kim, by the way, on the pregnancy. But it's enough to make you puke on the stair climber. But I don't commit treason over it. I just puke. And at every airport, it's always CNN. A shouting Ana Navarro at every gate. Still, I don't commit a crime. I just find a screaming baby nearby and listen to that instead. But reality's attitude is too common. It's this: I'm not getting what I want, so you're gonna pay. It's a childish response to life's challenges and thrives among those too jaded to see a country full of opportunity. Thanks to a media asserting that every cloudy day is someone else's fault, we've got a generation biting the hand that has overfed them. They're ignorant of their lucky birth in a nation affording them the luxury of petulance. But if life gives you lemons or Fox News, you make lemonade or you put on the headphones. America offers a million choices. Betraying it doesn't have to be one of them. But I guess these days when traitors are now heroes, why not? Chelsea Manning is 2017's Che Guevara, Snowden is a Hollywood icon, and Reality Winner will have a press agent soon enough. Good for her. Immature, bitter, nutty. She could fill an hour on MSNBC. So many ways to go with this. A little thrown off by having somebody run across these stages. I'm starting to talk. FNC is gaining, Dana. I mean, it's guilty. It's guilty. It's gaining.
Wait, what?
No, I'm gaining weight. FNC is guilty.
It's like, and they're guilty of for that.
Again?
Yes.
It caused him to gain weight.
So I don't know whether she was being sarcastic or flippant when she was talking to the FBI. When they released a transcript, she said, I filed formal complaints about them having Fox News on, just at least for God's sake, put Al Jazeera on or a slideshow with people's pets. I've tried everything to get that changed. Now, she's a young woman. She might just be being flippant. But as I recall, even in the Situation Room at the White House, they have all the cable television shows on
Yeah.
at all times because sometimes things happen in the world
Yeah.
that you don't know about. So like, maybe she doesn't want to have to watch this show, but you never know. We might have breaking news.
All right, Juan, I'm going to go to you to provide balance. She was in the Air Force, right? She's
Yeah.
an Air Force vet. She didn't pull a Snowden. She didn't just pull an indiscriminate amount of stuff. She hunt and peck for stuff that was specifically about Trump. Am I right?
No.
Yeah.
With spearfishing, the spearfishing effort by the Russians is what she was at. She wanted it known. And then it's interesting because the FBI guy, the interviewer, says, what about sources and methods? Because even if you said this should be out, Americans should know that what the Russians are doing and influencing the election, don't you think you're giving away government methods and sources? And she says, oh, I thought it was just a drop in the bucket. They must know because they're so effective.
So I don't know, Kimberly.
What?
She snuck files out in her pantyhose.
Yeah, so we had a situation here with that. Dana's like, I don't believe that. Who says and where's
Well, I just don't think that I am just skeptical that she would use the word pantyhose. It's a little antiquated. You and I grew up saying it. I don't know if a young woman would, and most young women don't wear them.
I'd say nylons when I'm wearing them.
I say pantyhose, but sometimes I say nylon. I say Dana. She's like, well, who wears that? I said, well, I do every day for like 11 years here. I'm nice cracking up. It was very funny. And I don't like that I have that in common with her. Maybe she put them on and put the files in. It's like she's the
Oh,
fawn
maybe
hall.
that's true. Maybe she just brought them for that purpose.
I don't know.
I think
Haynes her way at the
go.
NSA. I don't know. But look, she's going to make an excuse about this. Everybody wants to drag Fox News into something to say, okay, it's Fox News' fault. Fox News triggered her. She needed a safe place at the NSA so that she wouldn't feel upset and then therefore, do what she did and commit these crimes against the United States. I mean, how did the FBI keep a straight face when they listened to this nonsense? Like, that's not a get out of jail free card.
Jesse,
FYI.
Yeah, well, I thought that too. Not a good excuse.
Jesse, do you think? I mean, she served in the Air Force. Was that kind of why she got clearance? I mean, like they just give a benefit of the doubt. She served her country. That's enough. But I mean, you could still get a bad egg, in a huge bucket of great eggs.
True, but I mean, the hiring process needs some vigilant review. Apparently, she said Trump is a piece of S, and she said F the wall. So let's look into that a little more closely. She also said, let's be straight, there's no security on documents. Nobody pats you down. Let's check up on that as well.
So she kind of helped.
Yeah, and she also said she had a
There's a
sign.
hole in the hose.
Yeah, she had a signed photo of CNN anchor Anderson Cooper they found on her, although she said the signature was fake. I say you add another 10 years to the sentence for that. I think the Fox News defense is a good defense with all the left-wing judges. They'll probably buy that. We also should play Fox News in all the federal buildings just to smoke out all these resistors. They'll trigger them to commit felonies, and we'll just put them in jail.
We'll catch them all and just swoop them?
Just swoop them up.
Oh my good. All right.
What ideas?
She's like the female Sandy Berger. Remember the guy
Yes,
putting the
through
stuff down
through
his
the
pants?
The late Sandy Berger.
Nicely done.
Yes. Yes. God rest
Coming
his
up
soul.
is the so-called GOP establishment hoping for Trump to fail. That's what Rush Limbaugh thinks. Hear from him next.
You're an all-star, get your game on, go play, hey now.
I've been saying this for months. The Republican Party splitting apart. And after health care failed once again, it has many of us asking if President Trump will be able to get any of his agenda through the Congress. Rush Limbaugh, one of the president's biggest supporters, says no. And here's why.
They don't want Trump to succeed with his agenda. They can't afford that. I'm not exaggerating here, and I'm not trying to say things that'll be a soundbite that Fox replays the rest of the day. They don't want
5 days, Rush. They play in 5 days.
They can't afford for him to succeed with his agenda. They can't afford it. The lid's blown. The gig is over. The joke is revealed. If an outsider with no prior political experience can come in and fix messes that people have been promised would be fixed for 30 years, how does that make them look? They can't allow that to happen.
Greg, there's Rush Limbaugh, who is probably the loudest voice on the right, saying Mitch McConnell, yeah.
Yeah, first
Paul
off,
Ryan, yeah.
I'd like to point out that I said that the Kardashians were on Bravo when in fact they're actually on the E! Network. That was a test. If you knew that fact, you're no longer friends. I think that, you know what's
That was
great?
a sorrowful apology.
I think that Rush should play this segment on his show tomorrow of us talking about that segment. And then tomorrow, after that, we'll play the segment of Rush talking about this segment, talking about that segment. And then Fox and Friends can do it on Saturday. And then Judge Janine can do a follow-up on the Fox and Friends coverage.
I'll do it Monday at 2.
No, but you can't leave out Steve Hilton.
Oh, okay.
Steve Hilton on Sunday could come
Don't
in and
break
do.
the chain.
Yeah, he could come in and do all of this weekend coverage, and then we'll do a recap on Monday.
On the 5. That's good.
There we go.
This is
Well,
the
this is
plan.
No, because that's what he said. We're going to do it. We are going to do it.
Well, but back to the substance of it, Kimberly.
Wait, what
Just
was
for a
it?
moment.
Like a chain letter or
But-
something.
President Trump
meant to be.
at a dinner with big donors here in New York on Monday said apparently
At
that
the Bouquet, fantastic
Yes.
restaurant. I recommend highly.
Very
the
good.
Cajun chicken with the fries. It is, I'm telling you, phenomenal.
All right. So at this dinner, he says he thinks McConnell's weak.
Mm-hmm.
Then when he's asked about it by reporters, he says, well, you know, we'll see how things work out with the tax plan, and it's up to Congress to decide whether or not McConnell's weak. What's your take?
True story? Do I think all of that happened?
No. Do you
Yes.
think
And
do
do
you
I
think
think he
that's
thinks-
fair to McConnell?
I don't know if it's fair to McConnell or not. I mean, I don't know. I'd be like checking my wind boxes, and it's not looking too heavy or deep right now. But besides that, you know, people are blaming things on him. The president is displeased. So, you know, there's a number of different factors at play here. But, you know, you should be getting the legislative reforms through that you promised the American people. And one of the key players that is integral in making that happen and effectuating that outcome is McConnell. So, you know, in the leadership in the House and the Senate.
That's a good point. But on the other hand, I think people in the Congress, the Republicans in the Congress, are saying, you know, where's the leadership from the White House? Normally, the president would take the lead on something like health care, but President Trump doesn't get involved in the details and leaves that to the Congress, Jesse. And, you know, at this moment, then he wants to blame them for not getting the job done. How do you see it?
Well,
Makes a lot of calls.
Congress actually did repeal Obamacare, so I'm not sure how much we can blame Paul Ryan. There's a lot of other stuff you can blame him for, not that. That falls on McConnell in the Senate. And Trump's going to be very aggressive on pushing tax reform. You can see that in a bunch of speeches he's prepared to make all over the country. On the Rush thing, I'm going to say it, Rush is right. I don't know if people want to see Trump fail because they're just sloppy and discombobulated and can't get things through the Senate, or there's a lot of people that are resisting him because they resisted him in the primaries. People resisted him even in his own party in the general election. They were more concerned about conserving their congressional majorities. And then you have leaks also. You have the Russia investigation. Obama repeal failed. There's a lot of suspicions out there about the establishment. So I think Trump's biggest kryptonite right now is inaction, because he's such a man of action. He's constantly moving, and the voters wanted action. They voted for Republicans to control both houses. They voted for a Republican in the White House. They want to get things done. So when things stall and it returns to the status quo, that drives the president crazy, and that's why you see him triangulate with Nancy and crying Chuck, because he's just going to pivot around them.
All right. So, Dana, I'm just going to let you respond, and then I'm going to interrupt you. Go right ahead.
Just like every segment. The idea that the establishment is not for Trump, I think, it was true a year ago.
Right.
But the Fox News poll shows consistently, and again last night, 83% of the Republicans support Trump. The last two big major efforts that failed because of basically 4 or 5 Republicans in the Senate. Those are not Mitch McConnell. Now, maybe his leadership is not good enough to try to get those 4 people to vote with the majority, but also perhaps we need to have better policy that they would want to vote for. And these are huge, complex issues, as Greg called the healthcare issue, the La Brea tar pit yesterday.
One quick interruption. So Roy Moore gets elected to be the Republican in Alabama this week. That's pressure on President Trump coming from the right, isn't it?
Right. Well, it showed that in Alabama, for example, and this is probably going to be true in other states, you can run without Trump's endorsement and still win the Republican nomination. But you cannot run against Trump and expect to win in the nomination nor the general.
Right. We'll see. Catch the full interview with Rush on Hannity at 9 p.m. Eastern. Next up, an icon passes away. How Hugh Hefner became a pioneer for free speech in America. Stay with us.
I just want you to know.
We were on the right side of censorship from the very beginning. I think that one has to understand that what the First Amendment is all about is, it is first. It's primary. If you don't have free speech and press, you don't have democracy.
Hugh Hefner, founder of Playboy magazine, passed away last night at the age of 91. He was a controversial figure in media for decades. And Greg, you were in media for not as many decades, but you understand publishing very well. What do you think about Hugh Hefner?
Well, I like the way it's being framed as a First Amendment thing. He was a capitalist. He was making money off naked women. Let's not pretend that this was a big First Amendment thing. However, if you look back at Playboy and how quaint it is compared to the way life is now, our audience was probably raised on the idea of scarcity. It was exciting if you saw a magazine because that's all you saw. When you were a teenager, you had to sneak a peek at Playboy at the barbershop. Unfortunately, pornography now is the opposite of scarcity. It's plentiful. It's like water. It's trucked into your home via bandwidth, and it's because of decentralization, which has killed Playboy, killed the way iTunes killed albums. Now you can get as much as you want whenever you want, and it's changing people. I think it's turning teenagers into their own Hugh Hefners, where they're curating their own pornography at home. You have a jaded generation that's more inclined to the easy access of porn than actually going out and meeting someone and dating someone. And what is that going to do? Because physical attraction was supposed to get you outside to meet somebody, to marry somebody. It's like if they invented a food that didn't have any calories, but it tasted just like food, and so you ate that food. Over time, your species would die. That is what is happening.
Like kale?
Yes, like kale. But that is what is happening with humans are becoming more and more inhuman when it comes to physical attraction because they don't need to go out and actually meet somebody. We don't like talking about this, but it is affecting families. It's affecting marriages. If you talk to any priest or parish, they will tell you this is a big problem because the biggest vulnerability to monogamy is sexual novelty. And pornography is now being trucked into your house like that all the time. And monogamy is strong until you get to that point. That is the biggest challenge, and it is a big issue, but nobody wants to talk about it. Instead, they talk about freedom and liberation, but there's no way you're going to change this. But at least you should acknowledge the reality of what has happened since Playboy came out, which is we now have we have a faucet of flesh in our house.
You know, I couldn't
agree.
I couldn't agree more, but I just want to say how he changed what it meant to be a man in America. And the emphasis, putting aside the legitimate point you made about the flood of pornography, is the emphasis on the sophisticated lifestyle, the cosmopolitan lifestyle, the high tech, the beautiful women, the latest
cheesy
affluent
with the pipe
stuff.
and the robe.
But it wasn't. See, it wasn't cheesy. Post-World War II, 1950s America was a pretty, prudish place,
Right.
and you weren't supposed to acknowledge the girl next door. Hugh Hefner did that in a big way. And I think this generation, to pick up on what Greg's saying, doesn't get that part of it. It's all about the naked girl. So if you said, I occasionally looked at Playboy because I thought the articles were interesting, people just, But guess what? Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce.
Remember James Rosen did the interview of Vice President Cheney.
Right there.
Playboy.
Yeah, of course, now the magazine's totally
I
gone.
didn't look at it.
They tried to do away with the pornography, and guess what happened, Greg?
Yeah.
No magazine.
Yeah.
Jesse, one last word?
I'm going to cede my
good?
time to Kimberly.
Well, and guess
I went
what?
to the Halloween party.
Yes, that's what we want to
Amazing.
know.
How was it?
That was nice.
Did you have a costume?
I did.
What were you?
I was a police officer.
Wow, I'm
Handcuffs.
Many people wanted to
We will
confess.
let that sink in for the audience. One more thing is up next.
Got to get pictures.
It is time now for one more thing. Dana.
So yesterday was a fun and furry day in Kennebunkport, Maine, with the Bush family. 41 and Barbara Bush hosted veterans and their pets. Featured in a new book, Vets and Pets, Wounded Warriors and the Animals That Help Heal Them. It has 15 stories of wounded veterans, their pets, and how they help in civilian life. And it wasn't just dogs. There was a screech owl. Apparently one had a little accident on 41, which is good luck, I've heard.
Who did that?
And there is a pig. And Barbara Bush wrote the foreword for the book, and a portion of the proceeds of the profits will go to Pets for Patriots to help that worthy cause.
How great is this family?
They're so great.
Great, honestly.
Very
Always
nice.
doing such wonderful things. God bless them.
Well, I have a better animal segment than that. Who likes elephants? Roll the tape. That is a baby elephant in China sliding down a florist on his belly.
But nice music, Joy.
Thank Rob Monaco for that.
Yes,
By the way,
absolutely.
Isn't that beautiful?
By the way, where in China was that?
It's a province. I think it was.
Don't do it.
You did it,
You
Tom.
swan.
I must tell you, I sent that video to my kids. Everybody said that's got to be your one more thing, but you got it, Jesse. I loved it.
Thank you.
Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis says one of the biggest threats to America, lack of political unity. And guess what? Apparently, the Russians agree, and they've used social media ad buys to exploit the fact. Now being reported that Russia brought over $100,000 worth of Facebook ads during the 2016 election and created hundreds of fake Twitter accounts. And they use these ads to ignite divisive hot-button issues like gay rights, gun control, immigration, and race. They bought a lot of Black Lives Matter ads, targeted both sides of it, by the way, and even targeted certain geographic areas like Baltimore. In every case, the ads favored Trump over Clinton.
All right. And
you.
Kimberly's Royal News, again backed by popular song. That's right. Courtesy of Dana Perino, who gave it to me. All right, so earlier this week I told you about Prince Harry's appearance with his girlfriend at the Invictus Games. It was fabulous. Take a look at this little video, little munchkin stealing some popcorn from the fabulous Prince. Look at that.
Oh.
It's no problem. She's like, let me help myself to that. So it's a combination of food court and royal news.
Oh,
Wow.
nice
We
1-2
just
punch.
love it. Fantastic.
Very good. Greg, quickly.
Oh, I'm good.
You're good?
You're going to save that one for tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll save it. It's too long.
He was,
Okay.
he was ranting and raving.
Thank God. Set your DVRs. Never miss an episode of The Five, the special report. Up next.
Yeah, I have a video.